The fight to end child labor and the breakers' demise. The campaign against child labor in America was long, difficult, and bitterly contested. Coal companies and their allies argued that child labor was necessary for economic competitiveness, that families depended on children's wages, and that work built character in boys who would otherwise run wild. They framed opposition to child labor as sentimental interference with free markets and parental rights. These arguments seem monstrous today, but they carried weight in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, delaying meaningful reform for decades. The National Child Labor Committee, founded in 1904, made the Breaker Boys a centerpiece of their reform campaign. The work was so obviously harmful, so clearly exploitative, that it became a powerful symbol of everything wrong with unregulated industrial capitalism. Hine's photographs were published in magazines and newspapers, displayed at exhibitions, and used in lobbying efforts. The images were undeniable. Boys covered in coal dust, their eyes hollow with exhaustion, their bodies bent from years of unnatural posture, their hands scarred and deformed. State-level reforms came slowly and unevenly. Some states passed laws setting minimum ages for employment or limiting work hours for children, but enforcement was weak or non-existent. Coal companies ignored the laws, knowing that inspectors were few and fines were minimal. They also developed elaborate systems to evade regulations, keeping two sets of records, coaching boys to lie about their ages to inspectors, or temporarily hiding underage workers when inspections were expected. Pennsylvania, the heart of anthracite coal country, was particularly resistant to reform. The coal companies wielded enormous political power, and state politicians were often directly on their payroll. Reform legislation was blocked, watered down, or undermined by amendments. When laws did pass, they often contained loopholes large enough to preserve most child labor. The companies argued that breaker work wasn't really mining. It happened above ground, after all, and therefore shouldn't be subject to mining safety regulations. The breakthrough came at the federal level, though even this took decades. The Keating-Owen Act of 1916 prohibited the interstate shipment of goods produced by child labor, effectively banning child labor in industries engaged in interstate commerce, which included coal. But the Supreme Court struck down the act in 1918 as an unconstitutional federal intrusion on state powers. A second attempt, the Revenue Act of 1919, which imposed prohibitive taxes on goods produced with child labor, was also struck down by the Supreme Court in 1922. It wasn't until the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, passed as part of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, that effective federal restrictions on child labor were finally established and survived court challenges. The act set a minimum age of 16 for work in mining and other hazardous occupations. By this time, however, breaker boy labor was already declining for other reasons.